It's been another busy day of NHL news, including a couple of trades earlier today, and we'll get some more news to talk about here this evening, including the latest trade rumors around a variety of teams. We're looking at the Edmonton Oilers, Carolina Hurricanes, Winnipeg Jets, the New York Rangers. Plus, we've had a lot of signings today, including several top prospects from the 2024 NHL Draft, some more other prospects, including some other players for the NHL free agent frenzy continues, plus several players have filed for salary arbitration. We'll go into all those details and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we got a variety of things to take a look at today, including some more signings. We got to talk about salary arbitration and some trade rumors as well. So let's get into first some regular signings for established NHL players. And we had a bunch of prospects, including several from the 2024 NHL draft class, and have signed their entry-level contracts. First up, we got the Buffalo Sabres have signed defenseman. He was a pending restricted free agent. Henry Yokoharu gets a one-year deal at $3.1 million. That's a done deal for Buffalo. Of course, they already had a trade earlier today as well, picking up Ryan McLeod from the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for Matthew Savoy. It's a kind of a confusing trade in a sense. I mean, like I said, if you saw the video I posted on the channel earlier, if you haven't, certainly check it out when you're done with this one. But McLeod's a good player. Always been a bottom six player generally for the Oilers. He's really fast. He's good on faceoffs. But considering he's going to be 25 years old, to me, he's kind of tapped out. I don't know that his ceiling's ever going to be higher than a 3 or 4 center spot. Where Savoy's been, got multiple 90, 95 point seasons in junior. Had a heck of a year this year as well, playing in the Memorial Cup. This looks like he has a really high offensive ceiling. Now, until he realizes that potential, it's hard to say. I know the Sabres do have a lot of prospects, so they're not all going to be Sabres, but of all the players to move for McLeod, it just seems like a bit of a mismatch. So, confusing trade, but the Sabres definitely wanted to get a little faster, and they definitely needed to get better on faceoff. So I understand the immediate help and need that McLeod fills for them. And like I said, I like his game. He's a good player. Sometimes, though, I find he's a player that kind of leaves you wanting more, so to speak. Like really fast feet. The hands don't always keep up. Sometimes he gets a lot of chances because of that speed and just doesn't finish. So, the Sabres have had an interesting day, to say the least, between that trade and then the Yokoharu signing here. I kind of think that the $3.1 million, honestly, I think it's a little bit much, but we'll see how Kevin Adams continues to navigate things there. Going to be mentioned here in the later segment, talk about some trades as well that we could see. The Los Angeles Kings today have signed Caleb Jones. He gets a one-year, two-way deal. Jones has bounced around to a variety of teams here in the last few years, trying to find a solid spot to call home, see what happens there in LA. The Panthers have signed Jacob Megna. He gets a one-year, two-way deal as well. The Seattle Kraken today signed pending RFA Eeli Tolvanen. He gets a 2-year deal at $3.48 million. I think that's pretty reasonable. Tolvanen was kind of given up on by the Predators a few years ago. He got put on waivers. Seattle picked him up, and he's been doing a lot better there ever since. Not really sure he ever kind of lived up to the hype and the full potential that a lot of people thought he was going to accomplish in the NHL, but he's still young enough that you never know. He maybe not have completely tapped out his full potential just yet, but he's certainly earned that contract extension for sure. The Ottawa Senators today also signed RFA prospect Jan Jenik. Of course, Jenik was just acquired yesterday when they made the trade with the Utah franchise, of course, sending Igor Sokolov the other way. Of course, both these players were looking for more of an opportunity or more of a fresh start, and they get that with the respective franchises. Jenik signs a one-year, two-way contract with the Senators. Of course, league minimum at the NHL level. And of course, Jenik's a player, too, that's familiar to Steve Staios. Of course, he has history with him dating back to playing for Hamilton in the OHL when he was running that franchise, of course, with owner Michael Landlauer. And Jenik has, I think, a good opportunity to maybe even crack the Sens roster to start the season or get a lot of games as a call-up option. I think he'll have a decent shot, barring other moves, of course, at possibly getting that fourth center spot. But also going to depend on how Travis Green wants to kind of structure their lineup, because they do have Tim Stützle, Josh Norris, Ridley Gregg, Shane Pinto. They have 4 centers already, but I do think it's quite likely we're going to see somebody like Norris or somebody hopefully go to the wing and create more of an opportunity, because they're too offensively gifted to be playing on the fourth line here, in my opinion. So we'll see. A guy like Jack might be able to sneak in there and get more of a chance. As I mentioned, we get some other signings, including some top prospects. The Flames were really busy. A lot of these guys were getting signed as their development camps have wound up here. Some development camps are still ongoing or just getting started, but a lot of teams ran them through the entire week here this past week. The Flames have signed 3 prospects. The first one being left shot defenseman Etienne Morin, who was a 2023 second-round pick from the Moncton Wildcats, player I've seen play a couple of times here live in person. Pretty good-looking defense prospect. Gets a 3-year ELC. So he gets signed. They also signed 2 players that they just drafted here in 2024, including Matvey Gridin, who's the 18-year-old right winger, Russian-born but playing in the USHL. And then, of course, their top pick in the draft, 18-year-old right shot defenseman, 9th overall pick, Zane Parekh from the OHL Saginaw Spirit. So all 3 prospects signed their contracts simultaneously. They had I saw pictures of them on social media, all at a big table off the ice after coming off during their development camp session and getting their ELCs all looked after. We all seen as well with Seattle, of course, they had GM Ron Francis go on the ice and make an announcement for a couple of players here at the end of their ice session for development camp, not only announcing the Eli Tolvanen contract, but also that their first-round pick and 8th overall from the 2024 draft, Berkeley Catton from the Spokane Chiefs, has also signed his 3-year ELC. So we're starting to get a lot more of these 2024 prospects get signed. And the Capitals also signed their first-rounder, 17th overall pick, Tarek Periskak from Prince George Cougars, gets his ELC and all looked after as well. And the Ducks have also signed their 2 first-rounders, including 3rd overall Beckett Seneca and number 24 overall for Norway, Steen Solberg. Both have signed their 3-year entry-level contracts here as well. So lots of members of that 24 draft class. We're still waiting for some of the bigger names, like Celebrini, for example, has not signed his contract as of yet. Nothing to be concerned about by any means. Some teams are a little more anxious to get things going. A lot of it boils down to their development camp schedule as well, and just kind of waiting for the right opportunity. A lot of this gets done as the development camps typically wrap up. As I mentioned as well, we get a bunch of players that have filed for salary arbitration. This happens every single year. Today was the deadline for player-elected salary arbitration. So now that this date has gone by, if there's any other players that are restricted free agents that do have arbitration eligibility and they did not file, it's too late. So now tomorrow there's another deadline. We'll find out if any teams do it, but there's also team-elected salary arbitration. So if the team itself can take a case to arbitration, it doesn't have to be the player. It's not very common to get team-elected salary arbitration. It does happen. You know, you might get 1 or 2 cases sometimes a year. Sometimes there's 0. Just kind of depends. But for right now, there's 14 players, and we'll go through these names here. They will have hearings anywhere from July 20th to August the 4th. And that's, of course, assuming that they didn't settle their cases completely on their own. Now, the other advantage here as well is now that these teams have had an arbitration case be filed, once these contracts are settled, whether it be through arbitration or settled outside of it, they will be eligible to get another buyout window. That buyout window will be open 48 hours after their final RFA contract is looked after, and they can only buy out contracts that make $4 million or more. So again, sometimes you get a late buyout. Again, most of the buyouts are usually in the first window, and there's only going to be a handful of teams get the second window anyway. So here are the players that have filed today. The Columbus Blue Jackets have 3, including goalie Jet Greaves, for Kirill Marchenko and Jake Christensen. So obviously we'll see if any of them actually make it to arbitration. A lot of times they don't, but they have 3 to deal with there. Carolina has 2, Marty Natchez and Jack Drury. Again, I've mentioned both of these players as being potential trade pieces here. I mean, I think in some capacity, Carolina was looking for some more scoring help. They were really, really hoping to keep Jake Gensel, and that's kind of thrown a wrinkle here in their plans, and we'll see. But obviously, they'll either have to make a trade to get back, multiple pieces, or they're going to try to talk Natchez into staying. If Natchez does stay, I would not be surprised that he is one of the players that takes it as far as arbitration to get a 1-year deal. We'll see how it goes. But Natchez and Drury and Carolina both filed. The Sharks have Ty Emberson. The Sabres have Beck Malenstein, who they just acquired from Washington a few days ago, and young goaltender Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So, of course, he's a pretty important piece of the Sabres right now. We'll see if they can get things settled ahead of time. Detroit has Joe Veleno. The New York Islanders have Oliver Wahlstrom. The Toronto Maple Leafs have Connor Dewar. The New York Rangers have young defenseman Ryan Lindgren. The Predators have Spencer Stastny. And the Lightning have J.J. Mosier, who they, of course, they had just acquired from Utah in that Mikhail Sergachev trade that went down on the 2024 NHL draft. Now, one of the big names that's not there is Jeremy Swayman with Boston Bruins. That's probably positive. I would think for players who did not elect to go this route that are eligible for it, they must be pretty confident that they're going to get a deal done. You would think. Now, Swayman went through this process already with the Boston Bruins, and he said it's not fun, doesn't want to go through it again. So he was really hoping to avoid that this time and ink a long-term deal to be the goalie of the present and the future for Boston, which is obviously a no-brainer. They wouldn't have traded Linus Ullmark if they weren't, sold on the idea of Swayman being that guy. Now it's just a matter of agreeing to the right contract. So we'll see. But he's one of the bigger names and expecting one of the bigger contracts for players that could have filed and opted not to. Like I said, tomorrow's the deadline for team-elected salary arbitration. So not to say that the Bruins couldn't do that. They could. Hopefully they can get something worked out beforehand. And there's, of course, other RFAs out there as well that need to be signed. So we'll see if any of that comes together. Now, as I mentioned as well, we got some other news to take a look at. Before we get into trade rumors, there was one other piece of news I found interesting today, and that was an Athletic article, and it was also mentioned in the hockey news as well. But the word is that Edmonton Oilers top offensive defenseman Arb Bouchard, who is eligible to sign a contract extension, he is under contract for next year, and he will be a restricted free agent. So it's not like it's a major rush or really that super important, but teams usually like to get ahead of business, especially with top players, if they can, because the price never goes down. Another big year for him is going to push his value up even more. But apparently they say that he's very unlikely to sign a contract extension with the Edmonton Oilers this offseason. Now, again, if you're an Oilers fan and you've heard this news, I will encourage you to not be stressed about it. This does not mean anything bad. I think the big thing with Bouchard, there's a couple of things here. For one, the Edmonton Oilers technically don't even have a GM right now, although Jeff Jackson, who's the CEO and doing the GM job, is doing phenomenal. At this point, I'm like, why don't you just call yourself the GM? Because the moves you're making are incredible. I mean, I really like the McLeod trade for Savoy for the Oilers side of it. The signings they did in free agency, being able to keep Brown, Janmark, Henrique, they've done really well. They brought in Arvidsson, they brought in Jeff Skinner. To me, they've done really, really good work in this offseason. They've got a lot of business taken care of and quickly, which is phenomenal for them. But they technically don't have a GM, and I know they want to focus some time on getting that done. So they have to go through that process. Plus, the bigger name here, I think that is more. Not to say he's more. It's more important because it's a different outcome here. Is Leon Draisaitl? Leon will be a pending unrestricted free agent, so they don't want to get to the point that Leon is going into the summertime unsigned when he can walk away. They don't want to get there. There was an article I did see some quotes. I believe it was I'm pretty sure it was in the hockey news article. I can't remember. I read some of the articles today regarding Leon's agent, who was very optimistic that they would get a deal done well ahead of time, in that long term he's going to remain in Edmonton Oilers. I don't think there's a lot of concern at this point that way, especially after you can call it a comeback season after a rough start and the long playoff run and coming so close to winning the Stanley Cup. But to me, essentially, I think Draisaitl, McDavid, I think they're going to have a lot of conversations together, kind of decide the future. And I think Draisaitl's extension, I think, is more likely going to come either late offseason, going into training camp, or maybe sometime early in the season. That would be my guess. But Arb Bouchard, unlikely to get a deal done this summer. But it's not as nearly as urgent. And I think he wants to see how everything plays out with those two guys, and wants to know that what their future is before he makes his long-term commitment, which is totally understandable. But I think Leon's going to have to probably be the one to go first. And then you'll see Bouchard possibly come second. Or, you know what, if he makes it all the way till next summer and he's unsigned still, again, now we're into territory where McDavid's next contract is going to be coming due, and he'll be eligible for an extension. It wouldn't even be completely shocking if they got to that point and got McDavid's deal done and then Bouchard. So we'll see. This also could be a case as well, not just from the player side of it. I think it makes total sense for him. I think it makes a lot of sense for the team too, because as much as they really value Bouchard, he's definitely number 3 in the pecking order. There's no doubt about that. So I think they want to take care of Connor and Leon first, make sure that as they get each deal done, from a cap perspective, it sets them up to be competitive and good supporting cast, etc. down the road, and they can kind of just get things structured. So doesn't mean it won't happen, but it seems very unlikely you're going to see an Evan Bouchard big extension this summer. Now, onto the trade rumors. Let's stick with the Oilers since we're there. As I mentioned, we saw a trade earlier today involving 24-year-old center Ryan McLeod, who's been primarily a third, fourth line center for the Oilers. Skates like the wind, good size, 6'3", 200 pounds. Doesn't have a lot of finish, but he can kill penalties. And good character, well-liked teammate. Lots to like about Ryan McLeod's game. But like I said in that video, to me, great player. Lots to like, but he's a player that you kind of leave wanting more sometimes. When you watch him play, I always think he should get a lot more goals and assists, and he should have a much more offensive role, because he creates a lot with his skating and his brain, but it just doesn't seem to have the hands to finish. But at the same time, he's good defensively. He's great on faceoffs, and I can understand why the Sabres wanted him. So to me, that makes some sense for Buffalo. I just was, I guess you could say, shocked by the return price, which was great for Edmonton. I thought they might want to give up something less than Matthew Savoy, who to me is a terrific prospect. So we'll see from that perspective. But I don't think the Oilers are done. If you look at their cap situation, they really could still use a little bit more breathing room. They're in a situation that they still need to sign Broberg, and they don't really have really much of any space. So I do think after McLeod goes, now you're going to likely see a defenseman go, and I think the most likely, as I mentioned a couple of times, was Cody Ceci. Now, like I said before, back even in probably a week, 10 days ago, I thought McLeod and Ceci both had prime trade bait pieces written all over them as being guys that the Oilers could learn to live without, shed some money, hopefully get some sort of a decent return. Maybe they can stock the prospect pool or get somebody that can come in and do the same job for a cheaper price. And here we are. McLeod's gone, and now I think Ceci is very likely to be next. But we'll see what happens. It's not an absolute given at Ceci. I think he's more likely than Kulak, and I think it would have to be one of those two. They're not going to move Ekholm. As much as they probably would love to get rid of that Darnell Nurse contract, that's not going to happen. Of course, Bouchard's not going anywhere. Broberg's been a nice revelation, especially in the playoffs. Vinny Desharnais already left through free agency. So I would think you're kind of down to Kulak and Ceci, and I think Ceci's the more likely guy. But we'll see what happens, but that's where things are trending. And then from there, they're going to have to see now about who takes Ryan McLeod's spot in the lineup. I'm not sure that Matt Savoy is going to play the same type of role. I don't know if he's going to be AHL this coming season. Will he have a shot making that roster? Because they're going to want to put him in an offensive role. So I'm not sure. Now, next year, it's kind of like an all go in, almost like a last stand scenario, if you will, for the Oilers, where they've got all these guys coming back for another shot at this. With the cap going up a little bit more, but the big contracts coming due, I don't know that a lot of the guys are re-signed for even the lower contracts, like your Janmarks, your Browns, your Henriks. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep many of those guys for the year after. So that's kind of like, let's stick around one more time and go for it. That's what it feels like to me. So I think Savoy might spend a year in the minors, be a call-up option, but the year after we'll have a much better shot at being a regular, given all the exodus we're probably going to see out of Edmonton this time next year. So we'll see. But either way, good deal earlier, and more moves to come to make some space. The New York Rangers are another team that's kind of in not desperate need for space, but it's somewhat. I mean, obviously they would have liked to have pulled off a trade for Captain Jacob Trouba, and as we've talked about here on the channel a number of times, it's gotten really complicated and difficult, and it seems now a lot less likely that's going to happen. We know Trouba's got some trade protection, and he's fighting tooth and nail to keep everything so he stays in New York. He doesn't want to leave. We talked about the fact, of course, that it impacts not only him, but his wife's career, who's in medical residency right now in a New York hospital. And he, signed the contract the way he did and negotiated the clauses the way he did for protection until she was done, so that, he didn't really have to worry too much about being traded until, she was done that part of her career. And if they needed to go to a new city, new spot, they continue both their careers, they could look at that after. So honestly, I think the Rangers are probably stuck with Trouba for another year. It's going to probably make things complicated, you would think, when they go back to work in the fall. But in the same time, for right now, they've got some cap issues to deal with. They still have Ryan Lindgren, who we know filed for salary arbitration. He's going to be looking for a decent raise. Plays a lot of minutes, plays a very difficult job, plays a lot of the PK, eats a lot of pucks, and just, more of a defensive specialist. And, well, he puts his body on the line day in and day out, and he's going to want to be paid and compensated appropriately. And then there's up-and-coming defenseman Braden Schneider, whose role is kind of slowly growing here in the last couple of years with the New York Rangers, big right-shot defenseman. Again, once they get them guys signed, there's not going to be a lot of cap space left over. So, again, I go back to a player like a Capo Kakko, even though he signed a one-year deal, which would have been equal to his qualifying offer, even before qualifying offers were due earlier in June. They got that done lickety-split, and I really think that was done not only from a player perspective, saying, yeah, you know what, I didn't have a great year, I'm just going to take this and move on, I don't want it to drag on, but from the team's perspective, it's like, okay, he's under contract. If we can find a way to get him a fresh start, the team that he's going to will already know what his contract is. He's given himself a little bit of a bargain contract for another season, kind of betting on himself, and we'll see. So if you look at the Rangers roster and take a look at how they can create some cap space after they get these two young defensemen signed, honestly, I think, to me, Kakko makes the most sense. There's a number of other players out there that are, available for trade. I do wonder if there could even evolve into a bigger deal with multiple pieces, but that's going to be challenging for the Rangers to do at this point. But either way, Kakko, there's a lot of teams out there that are rebuilding or have some space, whether it be roster or cap space or both, that would probably be more than happy to take this guy. So again, I look for the Rangers to make another cost-cutting move soon enough, since they likely can't move Trouba, and I really think Kakko, to me, is the main player that kind of falls into that category. So we'll see where that goes. There is word tonight as well that the Hurricanes, after losing out on Jake Gensel, and they gave up a fair bit to get him at the deadline, that they've been pushing hard for Jets winger Nikolai Ehlers. So Ehlers has kind of become a new target of theirs. Now, we also know, as I said, that the situation with Marty Necas is, not the best. We know that he would prefer a move. He wants a fresh start. He wants a bigger role. I think at this point, Carolina's probably trying to talk to him about, maybe that bigger role can be here. You're familiar here. The coach knows you well. With the changes we've had in our team, you can probably be elevated. We know that they also still need to sign Seth Jarvis, so that's going to be a big contract. They have some other internal business here to take care of before they have the full, clear picture of their cap, but at the same time, Ehlers does make sense for them. I do wonder about Patrick Laine as well. I haven't seen any reports suggesting it, but if Columbus would eat a good amount of his salary for the remaining 2 years, I really think we could see a Laine-Ehlers reunion. Of course, they were great friends, at times line mates in Winnipeg, and to me, they could both make a good lot of value and good sense with the Hurricanes organization. If you look at how their roster stacks up, I think there's value there for both of them, but the right price, of course. I'm not really clear exactly what the price would be if they can get Ehlers from the Winnipeg Jets. We know that the rumors were that the Jets were going to be looking for somebody who can jump into their lineup right away and play. They're not looking to lose Ehlers and get a future first-round pick or a prospect that might be another year or two away. Like, they're still trying to be in win-now mode with these team that they have. And, it might take a player like an Necas. Could we see a bigger deal between Carolina and Winnipeg kind of evolve where maybe it's Ehlers, maybe there's other pieces, Necas and other pieces to kind of even things out. I don't know if a Necas for Ehlers is a one-for-one deal. I'm not really sure we would see that. Obviously, Nate just needs a contract, so of course he would have to be willing to sign there. We don't know how he feels. We do know that he's already rejected trades to 2 or 3 other teams because he wouldn't sign there. Would he sign in Winnipeg? I don't know the answer to that. Even if he won't, it sounds like Carolina is trying to figure out a way to get Ehlers. So I don't know that Natchez is going to be involved. What could be involved is difficult to say. I do know that Carolina has some really interesting young players that I think the Jets would be very interested in. There's also Rutger McGroarty and his future. We haven't heard a connection to Carolina, but at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if they made a play there. They have some other good young players, that are kind of in that same sort of category that recently come out of college and signed. McGroarty, I don't know if he. The thing is, he's going to want a roster spot, and I just don't know if Carolina's going to give that to him right away. So again, that's challenging. It's not going to be entirely up to the player. If he's not going to sign, the team's going to want some assurances on that. And would they give it to him? I don't know. But at the end of the day, Nick Ehlers is a player that we haven't heard about much until obviously once the Jets season was over, it became clear that he was looking for a fresh start and was looking to likely move on. At least that's what, based on his own comments and based on the reports out of Winnipeg, were. It's been a little bit quiet as of late, but like I said, the new reports today suggest that the Carolina Hurricanes are pushing hard for him after losing out on Gensel. So it makes sense. We'll see if it happens. Again, I don't know exactly what the return price would be, but some interesting combinations you can think of looking at what each roster has in store. And like I said, the thought of an Ehlers-Natchez type of deal that maybe has other pieces in it sounds pretty interesting when it's all said and done. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.